Today's notes are all about opposite numbers. So the first thing I want you to do is pause this video and get yourself all ready to go. You want your notes, or you can print them or have a piece of paper to write them down. I'm also going to choose to use colors today. It's totally up to you. I'm going to be using red, green, and blue. I'm also going to use a regular pencil, or in this case, a black pen, so it shows up better in our notes. I'm actually going to start with the definition. So down here, I'm going to use my blue, and I'm going to put a box around this first sentence of our notes. And this is the most important, so I'm even going to put some stars here. It says, opposite numbers are the same distance from zero. I would like to add something over here. On opposite sides. Okay. Now, it says the sum of opposites is zero. What that means is if I took 5 steps to the right of 0, and then I did the opposite, 5 steps to the left, I'd land back at 0. So I'm going to mark this on our number line. And so I'm going to show how -5 and 5 are opposite numbers. So I'm going to show in red how to get from 0 to -5. So I'm going to start at 0, and I'm going to take 5 steps to the left, and I'm going to show that with my red. 1 step gets me to -1, 2 steps, 3, 4, and 5 steps, and I land over here at a -5. And I think that taking those steps with my pen is really helpful to see. Now I'm going to show that +5 is the same distance from 0, so it's still 5 steps, but it's in the opposite direction. So we're going to take 5 steps to the right of 0. So again, I'm going to start at 0. I'm going to use my green here, and I'm going to take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps to the right of 0, and I've landed at the number 5. So the opposite of +5 is -5. I can also say that the opposite of -5 is +5. Okay? I think it's really, really important to look at this next little line here. It does remind us that the opposite of 0 is 0, and I'm going to put a little squiggle here. Okay, because 0 is 0 steps away from itself, the opposite of 0 is taking no steps in the other direction, so you still stay at 0. So 0 doesn't have a different opposite. 0 and itself are both opposites. Now, I'm going to show you how we might write or read about opposites. So down here, below these notes, there's this blank space, and it's blank for a reason. We're going to fill this up with different ways that we might write or see or read about opposites. The first way is going to be the most familiar way, and that's using words. So we're going to write we're going to write about opposites using our words. So the first way that you might read something is it says opposite of. Opposite of, let me pick a number, 2. Okay, so the opposite of 2 written in word form is exactly what we just wrote, opposite of 2. I'm going to put an equal sign, and I want you to think if you know what the opposite of 2 is. Remember, it's the same distance from 0, but on the opposite side. Hopefully you said -2. And if you're someone who needs to see that, head on up to your number line, and I want you to put your finger on 0 and take 2 steps to the right, and we're going to land on 2. I'm going to take my other finger and start at 0 again and take 2 steps to the left. 1, 2, and I landed at -2. Many 6th graders start to understand opposites without having to take a trip to the number line, but the number line is here and you can use it if you need to. So the opposite of 2 equals -2. That's how we write it in words. I'm going to show you another way that we write this in math, and that's with symbols. So opposite of is also written as a negative sign or a minus sign. And then if we want to take the opposite of a number, we usually put that number in parentheses. So if I were to read this mathematical statement out loud, this symbol says opposite of, and then this number says 2. So the opposite of 2 equals -2. We already knew that, but this is 2 different ways to write the same thing. Now I'm going to put a little squiggly line here. We're going to also talk about one thing that's kind of fun, but also a little bit challenging, and these are called double opposites. So we're going to take the opposite of something. Okay, let's write this in words first. Opposite of the opposite of, see how we're doing that twice, double, double. Okay, opposite of the opposite of, let's do a number 4. I'm going to put an equal sign so we can solve that. Okay, so the first thing I recommend doing is using a number line for these double opposite problems until you get the hang of them. So the first thing I'm going to do is find my number 4 on my number line, and I'm just going to hover up here and I'm going to point to a 4. Now, this first word opposite says that we're going to go to the opposite side of 0. So instead of 4 spots to the right, we're going to go over here to 4 spots on the left. So if I took just one opposite, I'm going to land at -4. Now, it wants the opposite of, but then I'm going to do the opposite again. So the opposite of -4 is I'm all the way back over here to a 4. So the opposite of 4 lands me back at a +4 again. Now, I'm going to show this again in case you want to see it again. So it says the opposite of 4. I'm going to start at 4. I'm going to take the opposite. So I'm over here at -4, but that was only one opposite. I'm going to take the opposite again. So the opposite of -4 gets me all the way back to 4. So the double opposites, you actually land back where you start. You took a trip to the opposite, and then you took another trip back to your starting point. There's a couple different ways that we can write this. So I'm going to scoot this up. So the opposite of 4 can also be written with all symbols. So we could take the opposite of, that's what these symbols mean, opposite of, now we're going to do it again, opposite of 4. Now I'm going to close both parentheses on the other side. So I'm going to read this again while I point. This says opposite of 4. So if you remember, we're going to land all the way back on a +4. So the opposite of 4 is -4, but then we take the opposite again, we are back to +4. The last way you might read this is actually a combination of the two. We might use some words, but also some symbols. So another way we could write this is opposite of, I'm going to use words. Now I'm going to use a symbol, opposite of 4. That also equals 4. So it's still a double opposite. One of them was a word and one was the symbol. Let's practice a few more opposite problems. We're going to open our notes. Okay. Now, we've got some notes coming up about something called absolute value. But right here, we have 2 opposite problems. So I'm going to grab a color for these just so they stand out. I'm going to use blue. And I'm going to mark up these problems as I read them. Now, both of these are word form. So we have the opposite, I'm just going to circle that, of -9. I wanted to pull out those 2 parts because it tells me exactly what to do. So I'm going to start at a -9, but then I'm taking the opposite. So what is 9 steps in the other direction? Did you say +9? If so, you're right. So the opposite of -9 is +9. Okay, let's try this again. The opposite of 12, I'm going to circle opposite and 12. Now, if I don't have a number line, I've got to think, well, 12 is 12 steps to the right of 0, so the opposite would be 12 steps to the left of 0. So that would be -12. Okay, it's time for you to practice. Hopefully these notes were a little bit helpful. Feel free to go back and look at them while you're practicing. And you can also use this number line if it is helpful for you. Good luck and do your best today.